What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the NIL Show. I'm Adam. There's Sean. Steven will be joining us soon. We are also joined by, I think we just realized, our first ever repeat guest, the unique distinction. Mitt Winter. Mitt, are you like officially a Twitter influencer now and an IRL expert in NIL law? I mean, I feel like you're the de facto go-to for all the stuff going on these days.
I call myself a Twitter influencer because I don't have any NIL deals yet. If you guys want to hook me up with one, maybe I have to call myself a Twitter influencer. But until that time comes, I would just say I'm a Twitter, college sports, legal, NIL commentator.
I love it.
How about that?
I love it. Yeah, got it. I guess that begs the question of what defines an influencer, right? Do you have to get a brand deal to cross that nomenclature? Who knows? But definitely one of our favorite follows, friend of the pod. We're really excited to have you back, Mitt. The last time we chatted, it was, you can go back and listen to the episode, but it was pretty early on. Things were still pretty up in the air. We're over a year since the last time you've been on, and I feel like I could say the same thing. Things are still up in the air. It's a little crazy. Lots of things going on. How have you kind of navigated the last year? Has it been good for you? Stressful?
No, it's been good. Kind of as you touched on, I can't believe it's been a year since I was on last with you guys. I mean, that doesn't seem like it's been that long. That time has flown. But I think that's just because there has been so much going on in the NIL space and the college sports space in general. There's a lot to keep up on, not just with the changing NCAA NIL guidelines, but then there are a lot of lawsuits going on out there, lots of other just, college sports legal issues at play. And so there's, like you touched on, there's a lot to keep track of right now. But to me, that makes it fun and interesting. It's not a situation where things are just completely static all the time and you go in, what your day is going to be like every day, with the changes and all the different things to keep up on. I think it makes things fun and interesting. Some people probably don't agree with that. Especially if you're working at a school, maybe you would prefer it to be a little more static and consistent. But from my perspective and someone who likes thinking about these things and reading about them and commenting on them and keeping up on them, I think it's been a fun past year.
Yeah, fun and interesting is relative, right? Like what you define as fun and interesting. Right. Well, I'm just curious. I mean, obviously, again, been friend of the pod for a while. Really grateful for you covering a lot of stuff that happens across the industry. We've come to have a keen affection for Mitt around here. So we talk about this all the time. It's insane trying to balance all the things that are going on, and then we all have lives outside of college sports as well. I think that's something for everybody to remember. Yeah. This is not life and death. How's the last year been for you? What's going on in Mitt Winter's world?
Oh, it's been good. Very busy, with work, but then also I have 4 kids right now, so they're playing a lot of sports. So, and that, keeps me busy, especially on the weekends and the nights after I get home, running everybody to practices stuff. I'm not coaching anymore. This past summer was like the last time I'm going to coach. I've been coaching basketball since my oldest son was in kindergarten. I was a freshman in high school. I coached kind of the same team that whole time. That's ended now that they're in high school, which has given me a little more time back in my life. I don't have to think about what we're going to do at practice a few nights a week and then get ready for the games on the weekends and stuff like that. So yeah, it's kind of been nice just to go and sit and watch games and not have to think about what's going to happen before the game and during the game and then after the game. Even though it's kids basketball, you still, you get invested in it and you think about what you could have done better when you're coaching and stuff like that. So It's been
100%.
a little less.
Get to be true fan.
Stressful is not the right word, but I don't know, just less brain time being used on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for those that don't know Mitt's background, Mitt played college basketball at William and Mary. I'm curious, is it more stressful when you were a player playing or when you're watching as a parent from the stands? Which one's tougher?
They're different. So as a player, you get nervous before most games. I think most players will tell you that no matter how long they've been playing their sport. And even if it's, like a rec league basketball game when you're an adult, you still get kind of those butterflies in your stomach before the game. But then once the game starts, those go away. You're in the flow of the game. You're not, the nervousness is gone. As a parent watching your kid play, it's different because you're not necessarily nervous before the game, but then watching, you can get, a little, nervous isn't the right word, but sometimes, aggravated watching them, like wishing they would have done something better, or, if they miss an easy shot. But I think I've developed over the years a pretty good job of trying to just sit back and watch and enjoy them playing. And if you get a little too invested in stuff, it just it can go bad for you and bad for the kids as well. So I've just kind of gotten to the point where I try and sit away from the other parents as far as possible, so I don't hear their chatter and whatever they're talking about, and I can just kind of sit there and watch. That's kind of my strategy now.
My dad growing up was legendary for sitting on the opposite side of whatever stadium, as far up as he could. He was like, I don't want to hear it. Just let me watch the game. That's awesome. I love it.
Yep.
Mitt, what's your process? I'm so curious about this, and I don't want to get you to give away all your trade secrets on how you find all your news and how you go about it. But what is your process on a day-to-day basis? Because you are one of the most active, if not the most active person on social media, constantly giving your takes on things, constantly sharing news in the NIL world. What is your day-to-day process? How do you keep up with all of it? And how do obviously it's important to stay informed, but there's so much information out there. I'm so curious how the heck you do it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a ton of information. I just kind of have certain periods throughout the day where I'll like go and check the news. Obviously look at Twitter, but then I have a few kind of go-to resources that do a pretty good job of aggregating some news and articles on things. So I'll kind of scan through those, and if this one sounds interesting, I'll click on it and read it. And then kind of just, I make a point of when I read something and I find it interesting, and I think other people might find it interesting, I just comment on it. Instead of just reading it and kind of keeping my thoughts in my head, I'll just throw those thoughts out on Twitter or LinkedIn. I think number one, it's just a good way to engage with other people. And then other people are probably kind of having those similar thoughts as well. And so they see that, and then they engage with you. So that's kind of my process. In the morning, I'll try and check out the news, maybe around lunchtime, sometimes before I head home. And then I try not to do this as much, but if I'm laying in bed, my wife might be watching a TV show, I don't want to watch some reality show, something like that, I'll check out what's going on at that time of the day as well. So just kind of try and be consistent with it and throw my thoughts out there.
Are you getting recognized yet?
I don't know. It depends on recognized for what and who you're talking to. Some people probably think I'm like, have these crazy ideas about college sports and where things might be going. Some people probably agree with me. But like as a lawyer, I've gotten some recognition among some different lists. Like the Power List from Missouri and super lawyers and stuff like that. So it's kind of nice.
I'm talking about on the streets, Mitt. Are people recognizing you on the streets yet?
Nobody's flagging you down. You can't see the whispers like, that's Mitt Winter. That's Mitt Winter over there.
No.
I love
some
it.
of the Sports Lawyers Association conferences I go to, there will be people come up and say, "Hey, I know you from Twitter," which is kind of weird. But
you're like, can you actually
like,
know me from my cases instead? I'd much prefer that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Mitt, there's a lot going on. I want to get into it. We can maybe start with some of the most recent ones, and then I want to walk some things back a little bit in terms of maybe just kind of updating the listeners on where certain legislation is. But one of the most recent ones is just this week, the judge granted Oregon State and Washington State their preliminary injunction, basically in regards to the Pac-12. This kind of started, I'll give the layman's background, but this kind of started because if you're a member of a conference and you announce that you're leaving as it relates to the Pac-12, you basically forfeit your right to sit on the board and be a member of that conference at the moment of your announcement, which for one or two schools, maybe not a big deal, but when all of a sudden it becomes 90% of the conference, you effectively turn over control to the remaining two schools, which can create some maybe conflict of interest in how the resources and assets are then divided amongst the two remaining schools. Judge just ruled in favor of Oregon State and Washington State, saying, yep, no, you're the only two remaining official members of this conference. You get to decide how these assets are divided up. What do you think is going through those other 10 schools' minds right now?
They're probably not very happy right now. They've actually already filed an appeal with the Washington Supreme Court. They've asked the court to stay the entry of the preliminary injunction, so to keep things the way they have been under the TRO that was previously granted. So that means they're asking Washington Supreme Court to just kind of keep things the way they have been while they then appeal the issuance of the preliminary injunction, because they think the court was wrong in giving Oregon State and Washington State the power to basically run the conference themselves. From their perspective, they're really worried that Oregon State and Washington State are going to take the revenue from this year that the departing schools think that they are entitled to, because they're still members of the conference this year, and use that money to do a number of things, maybe entice some of the Mountain West schools to join. There was some news today that came out that now that they have the preliminary injunction, they're kind of moving forward with a scheduling alliance with the Mountain West to lead to a potential merger. I think ultimately that one will end in some sort of settlement where Oregon State and Washington State agree that the departing schools will get a certain percentage of the 2023-2024 revenue. And then they'll say, okay, Oregon State, Washington State, you can do whatever you want with the future revenues. You have control of the conference. From here on out, just give us our revenue that we're due for this year. I think that's ultimately where we'll get to, and probably what makes the most sense.
So you don't think they're making a Washington State and Oregon State are making a quick cash grab to kind of control those assets? You think they're probably saying, hey, let's try to do the right thing here?
I don't know. I don't know exactly what their plans are. I do know that when the judge entered the preliminary injunction, he did say, I expect everyone to be treated fairly, even though I've entered this preliminary injunction, and kind of directed towards Oregon State and Washington State. If you do something that I perceive as being unfair to these 10 departing members, I'm going to have you guys come back before me, and we'll address that then. So I don't think they're going to do anything crazy and take the revenues that are coming in this year and spend them all in some way that the 10 departing schools are not going to be happy with.
So,
but we'll see.
That kind of leads into another question for me, and this has to do with another lawsuit, right? There was a number of suits that were brought against the NCAA, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they basically were brought all into one class action, right? Where potentially the NCAA or member schools of the NCAA could be responsible for upwards of $1.4 billion of damages, which I would assume would effectively turn into some sort of like back pay type thing to student athletes. Help us kind of understand, those are big numbers. They're saying, oh, this is going to happen, but probably not going to go to trial for a couple of years, number one. And number two, with all this conference realignment, like what happens to schools that are maybe now in new conferences than they were when this stuff was going on? Are they responsible for those payments? Like, what's the actual potential outcome here, aside from all just these crazy numbers and stuff getting thrown around?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the House case.
Yeah.
House versus NCAA. So that's an antitrust case that's really seeking two things. Number one, as you refer to, it's seeking back pay for the NIL money that athletes were not able to receive prior to July 1, 2021. And that goes from the date the case was filed in 2020 back 4 years, because antitrust cases have a 4-year statute of limitations. And there are three classes. There are Division I men's basketball and FBS football players, Division I women's basketball players, and then a class of other sports. So and that's around, because it is a class action now, it's around 14,000 current and former athletes in that class. And so when you add up the amount of NIL money, and that includes plaintiffs seeking NIL money that they say athletes would have been paid from the broadcast deals that conferences have with media companies. So that makes the number a lot bigger. It gets into that $1 billion range, like you mentioned. And then in antitrust cases, damages are tripled. And so people have estimated the number 1.4 billion, and then you triple that, gets you up to 4.2 billion. So that's a potential damages number for the NCAA, and then the other defendants in the case are the Power 5 conferences. The other thing that House is seeking, it's also seeking some forward-looking remedies of eliminating the rules that prevent schools and conferences from directly paying NIL money to athletes. And so that could lead to basically revenue sharing, and that would be the broadcast revenue money, where conferences or schools could directly pay a portion of that to the athletes. So those are two really big issues facing the NCAA and the Power 5 conferences. Number one, the amount of damages at stake are huge. Are they going to be able to pay $4 billion if they're hit with a judgment of that size? I don't know, but probably not. So what happens there? And then forward-looking, if the conferences or schools can revenue share the broadcast revenue with their athletes, that's a huge change from what college sports has been for such a long time and what the NCAA's rules are now.
Okay, Mitt, what's up? Can you guys hear me?
Hey, how's it going?
Can hear you great.
I am the dumb one in the room. That's going to be me today.
That makes two of us.
Okay, Sean.
You're not alone, Steven.
I have some personal questions first. These are real big personal questions.
So we got those out of the way.
Okay. Best NIL follow on Twitter, Mitt Winter, going on record. What role on a day-to-day basis? Because like I literally follow you to just like learn about everything that's going on, and you have you provide a lot of rationale. Explain it to me like I'm 5 a little bit. Are you actively on these cases? Like, have they called you yet? Like, I always ask Adam, like, why aren't you on Capitol Hill yet? What role are you playing in all of this, if you're allowed to say?
Like House case, I'm not involved in the House case at all. I've worked on similar cases to that in the past. Like I worked on the O'Bannon case and the Alston case. Actually, on the conference side, I was working for the conferences on those cases, and I've worked on other cases. No, but like most of the things I'm commenting on publicly, those are things that I'm not working on. So they're just things that for my job, I need to keep track of for the other clients that I do represent, because it affects the work I'm doing for them.
Okay. So then my next question is like, have legislators or congressmen reached out to you? Like, you should be on Capitol Hill. Do you just choose not to? Give us what's going on in Mitt Winter's DMs right now? Like that's what I want to know.
I get all kinds of DMs, but it's people that just want to like talk about things offline. Mostly, I have not been approached by any legislators to be on a congressional hearing yet. I've been involved in some conversations about people that want to be in some of those hearings, but no one has personally asked me to do that yet. If I was asked,
get on it.
Well,
Get on it, Capitol Hill.
You know that all of them are listening to this all the time, so I'm sure that after this,
That's right.
they will definitely reach out. Dick Durbin, our senator from Illinois, you hear Mitt here, but like, does it ever pain you to listen to those hearings? Like, I get flustered hearing them. I know Adam, like, we gotta put like,
Insane.
gotta make sure he's okay the next day. How are you? How are you like? Yeah, what do you, when you see this happening, like, how do you feel? Like, I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I don't go into those hearings with very high expectations, just based on how many there have been and how they've all gone. You pretty much know that a lot of the people that are the witnesses in those hearings and the congressmen and women don't necessarily have a very good grasp of what is actually happening in the real NIL market. Some do. Like, finally, there was someone from a collective on the last one, Walker Jones. So he hasn't seen those really well, how NIL works and what's going on out in the NIL world. But a lot of the other people, even some of the former athletes that they have on those panels, it's been such a long time since they've played and they don't work in the space. I don't see why they even end up on those panels. And then I think even, last time you had president of the NCAA, Charlie Baker, and Big Ten commissioner, they're so focused on like big picture issues. They don't really get down in the weeds of what's going on in the ground level NIL market as well. So I think that's kind of what has been missing from a lot of these hearings. Are the people that are, even people like you know what goes on. You
I
guys
sell T-shirts,
facilitate NIL deals all the time, talk to schools, talk to athletes. And that's kind of what has been missing from these hearings. So at this point, I don't really get too worked up at some of the stuff that's said at these hearings or not said. Just because I understand how they're going to go. The one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about these hearings, and I think it's kind of shifted over time, although the title is really NIL and they say they're going to talk about NIL, it's so much more than NIL now.
Mm-hmm.
NIL is kind of being used as, in my opinion, the Trojan horse by the NCAA and others to get these bills passed that go way beyond NIL and will have a huge effect on what college sports is in the future, kind of trying to mold it in the way they want to. Because the really important things that are in these bills now is, can the athletes be employees, and is there going to be an antitrust exemption for the NCAA? Those are the things that they really, really want. I think it would be nice, in their opinion, if they could get some of the NIL stuff passed as well. But that issue kind of pales in comparison to the employment issue and the antitrust issue. I think a lot of people have not really caught on to that yet.
And when they pick those, sorry, Adam, when they pick those people on the panel, is that just like people saying like, who's going to say the right things for us? I mean, it's just totally like, it just kind of feels like BS. I don't know. This is why I don't get involved in politics, but
yeah, I think that's some of it. Obviously there's lobbyists that are involved in this. And so I think legislators are being lobbied. And so they want to find someone that will be on the panel that kind of adheres to what the lobbyist is telling them that they want. And then on the other side, you'll have like Ramogi Huma has been on there. So, there's Democrats and Republicans on these committees. And so I don't know the exact process of how they pick witnesses, but, they obviously, the Republicans get some, Democrats get some. So that's kind of how you end up with the mix of people on there. But I think it's also an issue of the people that are putting people on the witness panel don't necessarily know who to reach out to get the best people on those panels as well. So I think that's probably another issue.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I don't want to like breeze past what you just said. Is a lot of these legislation, a lot of these bills, a lot of this, the topics of conversation that are folded under NIL actually have little to nothing to do with NIL. You know, we're talking about NLRB stuff. We're talking about unionization. That's employment status. That has nothing to do with use or ability to monetize your name, image, and likeness. Those two things are essentially in like different worlds. And Michelle Meyer talked about this a little bit recently in an article where she's like, we got to stop calling collective payments like NIL. Like that's not really the true heart of leveraging your name, image, and likeness. And you know, I think we see some similar things with what's going on with Michigan and Jim Harbaugh right now. Like there's an issue of competition that's happening, but the arbitrators of the decision are a former politician and a former media rights executive. And do I think that they're the only ones that are making the decision on these? No, they have, of course, a lot of people weighing in. But when you're a hammer, everything you see is a nail, right? So when you're asking these people who their entire perspective is on politics or media rights or, you know, employment to weigh in on competition rules or weigh in on the nitty gritty of brand deals, you're really asking them to do something that, quite frankly, they maybe don't have all of the ability or contextual knowledge to really understand what needs to be done. So it's kind of a scary, scary prospect.
So like we talked to, you know, we have go ahead, Mitt. Sorry.
I was going to say that's a good point, and that's why I don't think there's going to be an NIL bill or a college sports athletics bill, for that matter, that gets passed, at least right now. Because, like we just discussed, these aren't just NIL bills. They throw in so many other issues that are not partisan issues. If you just had a pretty basic NIL bill, and there's been one proposed by Senator Murphy and Trahan, I think. I think something like that would have a better chance of passing. But all these other bills, they have so many other different issues that are thrown in there that there's just not agreement on. So I don't see the chances of passage being high.
So do you ever worry? So we talk to, you know, we have investors, and the number one question they always ask is, what's going to happen when Congress does something about this? Is your business going to go away because of it? Is this going to impact you, right? Like, how much worry do you, like, in the state that NIL is today, how much worry do you have that Congress could slide something then that could really be detrimental or several steps backwards? Like, are you very concerned about that or scared about it? Like, how do you feel from a confidence standpoint?
No, I don't think with what you guys are doing, which is, you know, what everyone envisioned when NIL became a thing. You're doing licensing deals with athletes for apparel generally. And I don't think any NIL bill that gets passed is going to have any large effect on that and make anything like that go away. You know, it could have some small effect on it. Let's say there's a NIL bill that's passed that preempts all the different state NIL laws we have right now. That could have like a small effect on how you guys operate, because based on the athletes you're working with, you might have to have a little knowledge of what their state NIL law says if they're in a state that has a state NIL law. So you might have to adhere to that. So I think that's kind of really the only way it would affect you guys. I don't think there's any way that a federal NIL bill or law would end the stuff that you're doing. I think the type of NIL, and this goes to Adam's point he just talked about earlier, the type of NIL that a lot of these NIL bills are targeted at is the type of NIL deals that collectives are entering into with athletes. And I think the NCAA and some of the conference commissioners have become a little more public in their criticism of collectives and a little more open with their thoughts on how they would like to basically get rid of collectives, because they feel like it's moving the center of gravity for the athletics department a little bit outside of the schools, which they don't like. And so if those bills are targeting any type of NIL, if we're going to call that NIL, that's what they're targeting in my opinion.
Great. So there's, we can clip this, guys, and put it on our pitch deck. Thank you. That's what I needed. Podcast is over.
So that's your investors.
Yeah, there you go. No, but that's what people, that's real. And so I guess we don't have to worry that there's going to be a group license agreement to limit.
I can't say 100%, so don't hold me to that, but that's my opinion.
Or Congress is gonna give give Fanatics exclusive rights to every athlete. Okay, so I think we're okay. All right, yeah. I'm good. But okay, so it was just announced like athletes.org that you're on the board, which is pretty awesome. Could you and Jim Cavall's a friend and has been a source of wisdom and inspiration for us at Influencer and now doing this. Could you talk a little bit about what what you can say athletes.org is doing, what you're doing with them? Because I think as I'm hearing this, like if Congress is going to do their thing, it sounds like there's a select number of people that are going to try to make a difference. And that's kind of how it feels. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So athletes.org, it's a nonprofit organization. It's really, really formed to do three things. Number one, provide college athletes with knowledge. So on that piece, it's going to provide them with free legal counsel if they need legal counsel to help them review an NIL deal, access to financial advisors, access to doctors that can provide them with second opinions on medical issues. So that's the knowledge piece. And then another important part is the voice piece. So there's never truly been an independent organization where college athletes can get together and sort of talk about their opinions on these big issues in college athletics that directly affect them. And it's important now, with everyone sees there's going to be a lot of change coming in college athletics, to have the athletes get together so they can voice their opinion on the direction that college athletics should go and some of these issues, whether that's employment, revenue sharing, unionization. They can just get together, form an opinion on those things, and then express that opinion. And the way that's going to happen, the athletes are going to be grouped by conference and sport. So the first chapter that's come out is ACC men's basketball and ACC women's basketball. So there's a lot of athletes in those sports from that conference that are signed up as members, and they're grouped by chapters where they can talk about issues that specifically affect them as ACC men's and women's basketball players. And then the third part of athletes.org, it's going to provide athletes with some group licensing opportunities. So there's a partner organization called Athletes Innovations Inc. that has an agreement with athletes.org that will basically serve as athletes.org's exclusive group licensing partner. And so once you have athletes.org with this mass of college athletes, it'll be potentially an easier way to manage some of the group licensing issues that currently exist in the space, where it's sort of fractured. You have a number of different companies kind of trying to do different things. So that's what athletes.org is. As you mentioned, I'm on the board of directors with a bunch of other people that are doing different things in college sports space and just the general athletics world. So we have a great board. And then Jim Cavall, as you mentioned, and Brandon Copeland are the co-founders. Brandon's the executive director. So he's kind of the one running the show day to day. So I think it's just going to be a great organization for athletes to really, as I mentioned, get together and kind of voice their opinion out there on things.
So when the class action or antitrust thing happens and they're in bankruptcy and default, we've got a new commissioners in town. I'm just kidding.
That's right.
Sean, what do you got?
Well, speaking of things in the current news, I found this fascinating. We're going to talk about Lane Kiffin for a second.
Right.
I found this super fascinating because to me there was a big story and then there was an underlying story. The big story that everybody saw was Lane Kiffin, football coach at Ole Miss. He was there was a recording of him going around, presumably taken by a football player on his team who had stepped away for mental health reasons. And it was really the dialogue was a big debate over mental health, what role the coach and the program plays in that, and allowing the player to step aside, or whether they still need to report to. If the coach calls you to the office, do you need to be there? And so, what I thought was really interesting about this, that was the big story. The underlying story that I don't know would have been discussed years ago, before NIL, is a lot of people, such as yourself, Mitt, bringing up, that kind of sounds like they're an employee, the way the coach is talking to that player. Can you touch on that a little bit, and that situation?
Yeah, so it kind of brings up the overall employment question, which is being looked at in a couple of ways right now. You have the Johnson case, and then you have a couple of NLRB proceedings. And Kiffin's comments really hit on the exact point. So under the law, you're an employee if you meet these certain factors. And one of those big factors is control. How much does this entity that, I don't want to say is employing you, because you may not be an employee, but this entity that you are part of, how much are they controlling you? Are they telling you what you need to do on a daily basis, where you need to be, when you need to be there, things like that? And so that's exactly what Kiffin was talking about. He was saying, when your boss tells you you need to show up, you need to show up. You need to communicate with your boss. You don't just not show up to work. And he said work a number of times and boss a number of times. And so with college athletics, the big issue is the way that athletes are often treated meets the legal test for being an employee. And so a lot of people obviously don't want college athletes to be employees. And the way to really make that happen is to not treat them like an employee is treated, so they don't meet the legal test for being an employee. And I think a lot of people haven't really thought that through. And I don't know, it might be to the point where it's impossible for college athletics to change the way things have been for such a long time, how athletes are treated, and how college athletics teams and programs work, to walk it back, where they have a lot more control over their day-to-day life, where it's, for lack of a better comparison, almost like a club sport more. But to get out of that employment bucket, that's kind of what really would need to happen to ensure that they're not employees. And that's kind of where the issue has come up. So much money is being generated now by college sports. Previously, when there wasn't as much money involved, people weren't really worried about it if they're being treated as employees. But now that there's so much money involved, they're like, hey, you're treating them like this, and you're making so much money, and you're not sharing the money with them. So to make that happen, we're going to have to go to the court or the NLRB and get them declared to be employees, so you will share some of this revenue with them.
And I mean, as we like to say around here, the jelly's out of the donut, right? Nobody's walking back the time requirements that it takes to be an Ole Miss football player. They're not going to say, you know what, this is optional going forward. Right. All good. Don't sweat it. So it really seems like there's only one path forward, essentially.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely, whether it's the Johnson case, the couple of the NLRB proceedings that are happening now, or some future case, one of them is going to say that at least some college athletes are employees. And there might, it might be a few years of appeals and things like that, but it's going to happen at some point. And I think college sports leaders and other people involved in college sports need to start planning for a world where that is the case. I don't think that's really happened yet.
So this is, you talk about sports leaders. This is another interesting thing that just happened. I told you, man, it always is shaking up around here in NIL. It doesn't matter how many years we're in it. But ASU athletic director recently stepped down, and he retired specifically because he said, look, there is, paraphrasing here, a storm a-coming. And I am not, I have no desire to be at the till during that storm. But more importantly, and I think this was a great demonstration of leadership from him, he said,
Did I lose my video?
You need to have somebody here who can see this all the way through. Nope, you're still here. Yep, all good. So he said, really importantly, you need to have somebody at the helm here who can see this all the way through. So do you think that that's going to be a trend of, maybe some athletics departments? Because I think what you said is super important. Like, look, the time to fight the employment battle is over. It's now time to prepare for the, inevitability of when that happens.
Yeah, I do think there will probably be some more athletic directors and maybe other people working in college athletics that say, with all these changes coming, it's not what I signed up for, and it's not what a model I've been working in for such a long time, and I'm already close to retirement, or there are other things I would rather do. So I'm going to either pursue those other things, or I'm just going to go ahead and retire. And I do think you see sort of a divide, and this is generalizing amongst athletic directors and other people involved in college athletics. They're on the younger side. They're definitely more open to some of the different ideas and changes that are coming. Whereas if they've been working in college athletics and under the model that's been in place for, let's say they've been working for 50 years in college athletics, they're probably a little more resistant to some of the changes that are probably coming.
What advice would you give to school? You've seen so many schools in the positions they've taken, progressive, kind of sitting on their heels. What advice would you give to schools right now that are listening to this, like in their NIL departments, licensing departments, athletic departments? Like, what do you want to tell them?
From an NIL perspective, and I'm sure a lot of schools are aware of this, but the NCAA is considering some new NIL bylaws in January, and also some changes to their NIL guidelines, which are going to allow, or looks like they're going to allow schools to be more involved in NIL and potentially going out and helping their athletes find deals, which the current guidelines and bylaws don't really allow them to do that. So I would say kind of get ready for that, and kind of figure out how you're going to navigate that. Just from a broad college athletics perspective, I would say, start thinking about how you're going to operate your athletics program in a world where some of your college athletes will probably be employees, and where you're going to have to share some of that revenue that's coming in with some of the athletes. And so you're going to have to look at your financial models and budget and consider lots of other different things. Title IX. It's not a good plan to just kind of sit around and, number one, hope that those things don't happen, and number two, just kind of let them happen and they get to their inevitable ending point, and then you're not ready, which I think is something that did happen with NIL. A lot of people weren't ready when July 1, 2021 hit. Number one, they were still uncertain if NIL was going to be allowed. And then number two, they thought the NCAA was just going to handle it with the rules that they were working on. That's not the way things worked. And then a lot of schools were kind of caught off guard and weren't ready.
And it'll be really interesting to see what happens when legislation changes right when the transfer portal hits.
Yeah.
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 Right?
That's always
They're
the way
gonna
it
start
goes.
looking. They're going to start looking. It's going to happen.
And on those financial changes, those head ball coaches, maybe they won't be might not make quite as much money anymore. That seems like a good place where you can slash some budget.
It's possible, but they'll still be doing all right.
Well,
They'll do all right.
I think it's a really like not a warning, but the financial implications are not nothing. They are substantial if we're going to talk about rev sharing, if we're going to talk about employment, especially if we do that on top of having to meet back pay requirements. And you're seeing right now, University of Arizona, based on financial modeling, have a $240 million shortfall in their budget. The first thing they're coming out and saying is like, yeah, we're probably going to have to cut a bunch of sports. And so, it's not just this like, oh, the money is just somewhere in the cloud. Like there's very real implications to these if you do not plan well, if you do not, employ one of the most important parts of leadership, and that's forecasting and future planning. You could get caught in a really bad position as it relates to your ability to support the whole ecosystem. So this is not like, oh, like it'll be all right. There's real tangible implications here for sports across the board.
I know we're getting short on time. I have one. I just like to ask these questions. Sorry. What school? Okay, let's do this. What Power 5 program, in your opinion, is crushing it in NIL? And then what mid-major school is crushing it in NIL? And maybe like what you really look to see that they're doing like in the positive direction. Yeah, who are your favorites?
I think obviously LSU has gotten a lot of good pub for what they're doing. They obviously have some of the really high earners in the NIL space, which I think helps kind of build that narrative for them. So I think they're doing a good job. A school that's close, well, two schools that are close to home here for me that I'm familiar with. I think KU is doing a really good job with their NIL and the amount of support and education they're providing for their athletes. And then
Shout out Tate Gillespie.
Well, yeah, that's obviously
right.
because of everything. That's everything Tate did.
Yeah, they got some big shoes to fill over there with Tate. With you guys stealing Tate from them.
He came. I go on record. He came to us. He came to us. All right. Okay. Who else, Mitt? Sorry.
Then I was going to say Missouri is another one. They have a pretty unique state law, and so they can do some cool stuff with their athletes for that. So I think they're doing a good job. From a mid-major perspective, I think a school that probably a lot of people haven't necessarily paid much attention to on the NIL space, I think Colorado State is doing a good job for a G5 school. They have a good collective who's doing a lot of different things for their athletes with a lot of their different teams. So that's one that comes to mind. Yeah, those are some that are coming to mind.
Sweet.
Love it.
Now, I'm sure I'm missing
It's
a
cool.
bunch.
It's cool to hear your perspective because we're learning a lot about Power 5 and how they kind of look at NIL, and then how mid majors look at NIL, and it's interesting to see a lot of actually the innovation and progressiveness is happening. I think sometimes in the mid majors, like they're willing to gamble a little more, try some different things out, get unique, and hopefully we could start to see the long tail effects of that as conference realignment happens. So. Okay, all my hard hitting questions are I checked all my boxes, so I'm in a good spot.
Well, I got one more question for you, Mitt. I can't remember if we asked this last time or not, but it's our favorite question to ask on the pod. Future guests, just prepare your answer now because you know it's coming.
We did ask him this, Adam, but we need to know if it's changed.
Yeah. So, Midwinter today, what is your dream NIL restaurant deal? Who are you signing a brand deal with today?
And has it changed from last year?
What did I say last year?
I don't remember.
I'm trying to remember. Did you say? Were you Benihana?
We had a good stretch of Benihanas.
I don't think I said Benihana.
We had like a four street of Benihana.
I forget what you said, Mitch.
Times have changed.
We'll have to clip it and insert it in here.
We got to run the tapes.
It would have. So if I'm being honest, it would have to be a local place here in Kansas City called the Antler Room. which is my favorite restaurant in Kansas City. So if they would just do a deal where I can just go there and get free food, that's all that I would need. No
Keep it
cash.
simple.
I feel
No,
like you
anything
said that
else.
last year.
The
No legal
Antler Room.
advice.
I mean, there you go. That's 2 years in a row they're missing out on Twitter.
Is that what I said last year too?
I'm pretty sure you did. It
Well,
sounds familiar. I've never heard
At
of it
least not
before.
consistent then. So
At least
I
he's
really mean
consistent.
I
it.
love it. Well, you heard it here
least-
twice now. Antler Room, reach out to Mitt, Twitter, NIL law, super influencer, IRL expert. Mitt, so grateful to have you back on the pod. Fascinating conversation as always. We're going to continue to follow you. Like, comment, retweet, quote tweet, repost on LinkedIn, do all the stuff because we love your takes. So appreciate the time, the perspective as always. I'm Adam. There's Sean. That's Steven over there. This has been another episode of the NIL Show. We will see you guys next time.